Okay, and we're on. And I'm going to touch my mic, as you've told me not to. Quietly, gently. All right, there we go. Welcome to, I don't know.
5th
Episode 5.
Episode
5. Number 5. Good. So what I was going to say is I had an idea of what to go into if you feel like hearing it.
Of course, definitely. You've got my interest piqued now.
Well, it's something like this week's tweets.
Okay.
Or this week's. So, invariably in a week, you'll put out some quote, something will come to you and you go, I want to share that, some insight. And it's, like me, I'll put out a tweet or put out on Instagram, a little thing, a little thought that, like a spiritual aphorism. Because I was looking at this idea of aphorisms, and someone had said an aphorism is something, a short, I don't know, pithy piece of a quote or something that requires explanation. Which I quite like the idea of. And because, so you'll put out I put out a tweet, you'll put out a tweet, it's short, it's pithy, hits the spot, but it's food for thought. It's not like a long form treatise on spiritual insight. It's a little germ.
Yeah, it's a jumping off point.
Yeah. And by putting those little sort of quotes out, it hopefully that it'll open up something inside that'll resonate, unpack something. But I thought maybe we can look at something short and pithy that we've done, and that can be a little jumping off point for us.
Sure.
Because I loved what you put out this week, the other day, beyond Imogen quotes on Instagram.
You'll have to remind me.
Well, I'm gonna read it.
I've spent most of the week in a daze of confusion.
Yes, it's true. You've been laid up most of this week, haven't you, with a bad neck?
Yes.
Yeah, in a sort of a half light of rest and awake.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week, actually.
Because you had to, cancel a lot of sessions, events, stuff.
I had to cancel a lot, but what was interesting about it was it really required me to practice what I preach.
For example?
So it's something that we've spoken about a lot, actually, which is the need to go into pain.
Right.
And where that bottoms out is like pain is really can be very distressing, and you can suffer pain when there's a subtle resistance to that which you're being called to. And so I think possibly I can't think of a time where I've been in more pain than I have this week, and I've spent a lot of time in various ways in pain in my life, but sustained high level pain, and it required me to sort of drop into essentially Samadhi, or rather going into and through the pain and
into the heart of it. So which becomes something else at that when you're dove right into the heart of it.
It does. It's hard though. It's really hard because you have to go through the pain. You can't go around it. You can't bypass it. You can't avoid it. You have to go into the heart of it, and that is quite intense. So I spent quite a portion of my week, I would say, really having to move into this very high level, intense bodily
pain.
Yeah, unavoidable pain.
That's the thing. That's the thing. The unavoidable part of it.
It is, and there's nothing. There was nowhere else to go.
No,
nothing else to do. So yeah, that's what I mean by practicing what I preach, moving into that which is arising again and again and again, deeper and deeper and deeper. And yeah, it takes quite a bit of courage, I would say.
But it's like, I get it, because you're sort of left with nowhere else to go in some ways, isn't it? You know, if you stay on the outer level, you know, of the pain, it's just, pain can become intolerable. So what do you do with that? You know, how do you respond? So
you have to go in. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of trust to go into it, actually, because there's all the training that is saying, run in the opposite direction, run. And you just can't.
But there is this intensity. You talked about Samadhi of it, and you know, I experience the same thing if I'm experiencing pain like that, and it's sort of unavoidable, and you're trying to get comfortable or something like that, and it's just not available on its own level. So, you know, what I find is that, just as you say, it's like a call right into the depth of that experience, into the heart, into the spiritual heart, into a outside, deeper and deeper, and finally sort of outside of that, of the gross sensory experience that it is, into a more subtle, actually intense though, in a concentrated place where, you know, it's a form of, you know, I'd call it a samadhi. And it's funny because this came up the other week. I was reading one of the Buddhist sutras or fragment of it, just before the Buddha was, he was just about to sort of die. He was quite unwell, quite sick. I think he had cancer or something. But he was talking to his guide. Have I talked about this before? Was it just you and me, or I actually sat here? I have.
It's hard to keep track of what conversations we've had privately. And
well, I think it's important to talk about this anyway, because even if I've talked about it again, because it's a very particular sort of thing. It's dropping into the what was called the signless abidance of the heart. I think something like that. The signless, meaning you're beyond. In dropping into this experience, you're dropping beyond all signs, all sensory input, all that. And you're dropping into the sort of the very core of your non-conceptual being. Yeah. And so you're, in a sense, before and beyond the
that's where it bottoms out. Yeah.
That's where it bottoms out. Yeah. But the pathway is through the strong experience that you're having. Yeah. So I get that.
So yeah, to circle back around to what you were saying, I can't remember what I put out this week.
All right. So I'm going to read this one because I really like it. So I'm going to read this. This is you writing. Love feels like the greatest risk, but is in fact the greatest reward, because love itself is the reward. Love cannot be taken away from you. Only the seeming objects of love can come and go. But love is the subject. You are the subject. You are love. So let love flow. Let it not be about the object. Let love be about you, that tender expression of love that you are. I love that.
That's a good one.
Because, you know, love is its own reward.
It is.
And it's important to note that the love as we experience it isn't embedded in the object of love. No. We are actually the experiencing and the source of that love. It just so happens people, situations, things, objects receive that, get enfolded into that experience, and then mistaken as the source. So something we love gets taken away and we think, oh, we're absent love now. No, the love is still entirely present as our own nature.
All the attention goes on the object of love.
Exactly.
And we mistake that, yes, as you say, we mistake it. And actually, when we turn back in on ourselves, so we turn our attention away from the object of love, but we turn that attention back into the subject of love, as in, I am feeling that love. And notice what that love feels like, where it emanates from, which is the self. And recognize that it is not something that comes and goes, actually. It is something that we attune into in ourselves, that is expressed or not expressed, but is still at the heart of everything. I feel love is at the heart of all existence, actually. And you look at why we do things. And even if on the surface level someone's doing something out of seeming fear, if you go even beyond that fear, it's always from love. It's they're trying, like, for instance, they could be afraid of dying. Well, what is underneath that fear of dying? The love of living, the love of life, the love of existence. Right. So we don't go deep enough to recognize the love.
Yeah, all our actions, all our direction, all our choices are aimed at the good, let's say. It's never aimed at the bad. Even the most evil act is actually aimed at the perceived good.
Yeah, it might not be conscious.
Well, this is it. So much of our, I don't know where I've heard this, but all our problems are a lack of love, ultimately. So we haven't sort of expanded our field of lovingness. Our own nature hasn't expanded to enfold all that is perceived sufficiently to be loved, to love and be loved. So there's a limit. We have limits on. We set up parameters where I love this, but I'm not going to love that.
Yeah, conditional love.
And you talk a lot about inclusion, acceptance, and it's like find those places where you're not including, where you're not accepting, right?
I mean, to me, so we could switch to self-love here, which is what you're touching on there, because there's external objects of love, but that also goes, quotes, internally,
self-love.
Yeah, and
in the healthy sense.
Yeah, I mean, people sort of have asked me in the past, how can I be more self-loving? And my answer to that is you can't be more self-loving. You can't be more loving. You can just recognize that which is excluded from your love. So to be more self-loving is not about going out and looking for more love. You are love.
Yeah.
It's really about looking for all your exclusions of that. So, I have this trait or this thought or this experience that can't be, and that's the exclusion of love there. This shouldn't be happening, this shouldn't be part of me. And so really to find that, quotes, more self-love is really about extending into all those parts which we've excluded and to include them. And in that inclusion or acceptance, there's the love. The love is what you're left with when it's not excluded. When life is not excluded, what you're left is love. So that to me is the answer to self-love, is not going out and looking for more love. It's going out and looking for all those areas where there's there's rejection or resistance or pushing away or exclusion of something.
And so in someone, in one sense, that's forgiveness. When you meet those points of resistance, or where you're blocking the flow of loving awareness, and often there's a story around that, right?
Very rational reason, maybe.
Very rational reason, and it's often based on it's conditioning, it's trauma, it's misapprehension, it's all sorts of things. But finding those spots and what do you do with them? How do you move past them? How do you dissolve? And there's the power of the heart and the power of forgiveness to let, because forgiveness is letting go.
Yeah.
And not avoiding, not resisting, it's letting go. It's letting the flow, as you talk about this current of love and being, letting that flow unimpeded by resistance or disturbance. In fact, on that note, I'll go to the tweet that I put out this week because it actually speaks to that right now. What did I say? I said, could it be so simple to let life flow without disturbance or resistance? Just get out of the way. So there's this. So there's the noun and the verb of being, and sometimes it's useful to speak of it as being as this ground, this. And it's just understanding it as the thing in itself, being in itself. And then sometimes I like to the being, we start to refer to things like flow, and the flow, the life flow, the life stream. Just get a sense of that unbroken, ever flowing, the great Tao. Go with the flow, and. So what obstructs that? So what is that to start with? Well, in my experience, it's a field of flowing, loving awareness, which contains all experiencing. But then, as it's flowing along, as you'll bump into something, some thought, some idea, some resistance to the flow of that, and. So that's the challenge, to be aware enough that as you meet these resistances that come up quite naturally, probably, let's say, due to things like conditioning or trauma or poor conceptions of reality, sometimes. Being able to meet them, include them, allow them, forgive them, let them in, let them go. But I was thinking earlier, I was writing earlier, when you say go with the flow, that's a sort of a provisional teaching, that is, because it seems to speak to a person, and let it be, let it go. It seems to speak to someone, but then it just occurred to me. I thought, if I say let it be, let it go with the flow, I'm not actually talking to the person at all. We're always that's that person. Talking to the person, in a sense, is that sort of provisional teaching. You're crediting the existence of a person who can take an action, and taking that action is sufficient for their freedom. But actually you're speaking to all levels, and the deepest level, their being itself, that's beyond that personhood, that can, in a sense, see and let go, and already is ungrasping.
Yeah, this sort of speaks to one of my favourite pointings. One of them, where prescriptions turn into descriptions.
Right.
To a person, all they'll hear is prescription, something I need to do, something I need to achieve, some goal that I need to get to. Always seen as prescriptive. But what happens eventually is a giving way to a recognition of, it was always a description of my nature. But while I believed myself to be a person that can do, that's why it feels like a prescription.
Yeah.
When I recognize that actually I was always being, playing out in the great happening of life. And therefore it was always a description of that. So like when you speak of resistance, for instance, you know, a prescription or an instructive thing you could say to someone is to not be in resistance of the resistance, to open up, to soften around the resistance that you're feeling. So that's the prescription, but the description is really that it's a noticing that there is softness, there is room, there is an opening to even the contraction or the resistance of life in that moment. So it's a little bit like the river flowing around the rock or the stone in the river. It's a description of that happening. Mm. So the river isn't impeded by that rock, but it does go around that rock. So yeah, it feels like a prescription. I need to be accepting of my resistance. I need to open up to my resistance. I need to find the metta for that resistance. But actually...
I mean, it makes me think, truth is, whenever you're whenever you're sort of speaking with someone or teaching or whatever, we are always talking to the self anyway. Yeah. You know, it's never because the person actually doesn't exist as such. The person has no volition. It's always the self that's responding as the person through the person. Yes. But you're always speaking to the intelligence. It's always the knower. It's always the self itself. That's.
But it's dressed up in words that the person can.
Yeah, it seems
understand.
Yeah, it's somehow it's the way the process of the dissolution of the personhood. Yeah. You know, the dissolution of the false sense of personhood, and by that, it's worth mentioning that it's not that the person itself is bad, wrong, evil, or anything. It's just that it's just a functional appearance, and it has no core. You know, the heart of us is being itself. It's beyond the person. It's prior to the person. So, it's in a sense all the instructions is aimed at that, even though ultimately. It's all just this dance. It's very tricky to sort of slip in and out of, let's say, what you call provisional and definitive or absolute and relative teachings, because it seems so necessary sometimes to speak to the person when they're at a certain stage.
I think it is.
You just have to, and then
because otherwise, if you don't, early doors. Both of us experienced this. Yeah. Early doors being much less compromising in that sense, like not conceding to
personhood,
the person,
autonomy, doership.
Early on, we're talking years ago now. Mm-hmm. I remember I was a lot more, and I look back at the way I would speak to people.
Yeah.
Was much more uncompromising, put it that way. But I saw what effect that had on the system, on the nervous system, particularly. Effectively, and again, it's not even a conscious thing. It's like a protection mechanism of watching someone defend and close down around it's like the ego, the mind, body belief of itself. Sort of, the image I get is like a group of soldiers sort of skirting around into
circling the wagons or something,
to protect, and it's that I saw that happen time and time again. That actually, it actually in that uncompromisingness, if someone wasn't ready and open for that, actually what it did was the opposite, which was double down. Like the ego, the protection mechanism, the coping mechanism, sort of double down and contracted even further.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think at a certain point, and I didn't do this consciously, I'm just looking back at it now and going, oh, at a certain point, I recognized that the whole system needed to open up, and the only way to have the whole system open up energetically was to, instead of attack, to effectively to love, to open up in love, to point to that which is open rather than attack that which isn't.
Yeah, I see.
So it looks on the outside much more compromising in terms of the way I speak now, and I think the way you speak as well. But in effect, it's sort of pointing to the heart of things without attacking beliefs directly.
Right. Well, it's interesting that the analogy or the metaphor has just come up, and it's about appropriateness to where someone is. So, and I speak this about others, but this is exactly what I was. My whole path was about the appropriate teaching and the appropriate, insight at the appropriate time that allowed the next opening to occur, the next opening to occur, the next opening to occur. And you can't, it's like having a garden. You plant a seed, a little sprout comes up, and you throw a ton of manure on it. And you go, well, that's the truth. You're going to have to, this is your reality in a field full of manure. But it just crushes the plant. You have to tenderly nurture each new level, and trusting that each new level yields to the next level. You can't skip so far ahead, and so so it's a case of giving the appropriate, meeting someone where they are, and allowing the next thing to open up, the next progression that inevitably leads to the full blossoming of insight and liberation. But there's no point trying to, land the ultimate, uncompromising, ultimate, definitive truths to someone who simply is not ready or able to hear that. And there's a great line in the Bhagavad Gita that speaks to this as well. It's about being appropriate to your own dharma. What you're born for, and what where you're at, in your own, spiritual unfoldment. And it says, to something like, to adopt the dharma of another, there's great danger in that. Better to die than to live another's dharma. And, that's a really important point, that we have to be where we are. And not go, hey, I like where they are, I want to do that, and it's completely inappropriate for you. We each have a path that's unfolding for us in the optimum time. Absolutely.
And that path, while can look similar in certain aspects in certain times, is entirely unique. And I mean, that's why I feel comparison is deadly, really deadly, because it assumes that where you're at is wrong.
Yeah.
And it assumes that where you're at is not inherently the most, evolutionarily speaking, supportive for you, not just as a human being, but you in the broadest context.
Yeah. We get exactly what we need when we need it.
Yeah, and that's hard. That's a hard thing to say to people, particularly if they're walking through a really tough time. Because, of course, we look at someone and go, oh, they've got an easier time of it, I want that. And so, but it's very hard to acknowledge when we're walking through something very tough that actually it's necessary.
Yeah, and this has been coming up for me a lot. That is the framework of meaning by which we grow, progress, and deepen our compassion and our love. And funny enough, I was reading a Zen master, D.T. Suzuki. He was a great exponent of Zen around the turn of the century until the 40s, I think, or maybe he died in the 60s, something like that. Anyway, great exponent, theoretician of Zen. But, it's interesting. I was reading some of his essays, and, in some ways they read almost as sort of a Christian doctrine. Just this notion that it's our suffering that purifies us. It's by, and he was saying, when you see someone who's gone through life and had suffering, it humbles us. Mm-hmm. It brings compassion for others and insight and love. Mm-hmm. It can, don't get me wrong, suffering can break you. Mm-hmm. But even that somehow is a spiritual, there's a spiritual dimension, a spiritual context for that, and that's what we're proposing here. Is we can't speak to society or politics or any of these things. This is about our spiritual life, and what is it that liberates us and to the truth of reality, and at that, let's say, unleashes our compassionate nature, our loving nature. What is that? And in my own life, on my own path, it was the times when I've sort of hit a sort of a catastrophe in my life, or an impasse, or something I was struggling with. It was actually that humbled me, and that humility, or the humiliation almost, that humbleness and that kind of broken powerlessness that I experienced at various stages and times in their own way, and my then willingness, or inevitable willingness, I've got no answer to this. I simply, have to surrender to this experience, this situation. It creates, it brings about grace. It opens the door for grace. That humility. Because as long as we feel like we're in control, as long as we feel like we've got this, I've got this, life is swimming, you can kind of cruise along with a subtle sense of arrogance and entitlement. Oh, I've got this. This is all good.
We like to take ownership of all the good stuff, and we like to blame or reject all the bad stuff as not our doing. Yeah, and I think both are false, actually.
Yeah.
To reject or to claim is, I think, both false, because it comes from I am doing.
Yeah.
Rather than the open-palmed recognition of this is what's happening.
Well, I was reflecting on gratitude the other day, and what I saw was that I've spoken about this before, I've written about this before, that I wasn't really grateful before. Mm. On my path, my spiritual path, I wasn't, gratitude wasn't really pertinent to me in a sense. I didn't use it. I know a lot of people sort of, look to practice gratitude, and I think that's great.
I think it's a very strong practice.
It's a very strong practice. But for me, it came the other way around. Mm. It came through clarity. That it was only after awakening that gratitude came online, because I saw that, one, I wasn't doing any of it at all. In fact, there was no one here to do any of it, And and that it's all a gift. It's all a gift.
Yeah.
And not that my gratitude is based on this understanding per se. It just arose. I'm using the understanding to sort of just try to express some of the ideas around that. You realize that this life is an absolute gift, in the sense that it's not always a welcome gift, right? You can get a really dodgy pair of socks. That's not a great gift. It's a gift still, but you don't necessarily want it.
Totally.
So when I say it's a gift, it's a given. It's a givenness of it all.
Yeah.
And so that gratitude came out of it came along with humility. You know, I don't do anything. I can't make anything happen. I can't earn anything. You know, I can't be worthy of any. You know, life is a great gift of the self, of my own nature, sure, or of God, however you want to, you know, contextualize this. But it's given, and it's full of beauty as well. And I'm not entitled to any of it, good or bad. It's just so deeply, you know, humbling.
And I think with that recognition of I'm not entitled to any of it, it's when you realize that everything that is given is a precious thing that life has bestowed.
Yeah.
Again, good or bad, if seen in that context, and if seen in the context of wisdom, not comfort, as in this thing that is happening brings with it the gift of wisdom, not necessarily to just keep me comfortable. Then you start to see even the most difficult occurrences in your life as a good gift, even though when you're going through it, it's not a comfortable and pleasant gift, but still a good gift in terms of having inherent value in terms of purposefulness. It has a purpose. It has a wisdom to it. It has a learning for me in this moment, for growth.
Well, I was, you know, I'm of the feeling more and more, or rather, I always have been, but it coming into sharper focus, that this life that we are living here, the nature of this human life, this material life, this is like a training ground for the spirit. You know, and this came very clear actually after years of, you know, spiritual practice and satsang and self-inquiry and all that just coming to see that there's a certain point where you see that everything that happens is satsang. Yeah. You know,
your path.
Is your path. Whatever happens is your path. And there's no like, oh, you're in satsang, you're out of satsang. Or
you fell off the path.
This is for learning. But this is just a mistake and it shouldn't be, you know. No, it's every moment. And as someone said once, I quote something like, consider every experience you have as a communication of God to your soul. And it's that notion that it's all... its function is evolution and growth.
Yeah. Even those dead ends you go down,
everything
teach you just as much as any other experience. Exactly. Because they go, oh, okay, no, that not there. That when you go down that dead end, that's what happens. Yeah. And that wasn't the right direction, but it wasn't wrong to go down there because you deeply learnt something.
Yeah. So don't expect. This is to me. Don't expect, you know, have a nice smooth ride of it if you've got, you know, traumas and things to learn and you know, sore points. Life's got to keep curling them back on you.
It is.
It's going to keep going until we get through that, and that seems like I want to go off the ride.
To see those
sometimes, right?
As actually not as mistakes or life out to get you, but actually life's gifts of showing you where there is work to be done, where there is something to be met, something to be listened to, something to be learned from, something to be heard. It's literally life working for you, not against you. And we think, oh, why does life keep bringing up this thing that I don't like, and it's a really horrible experience? Well, because actually life is literally not, it's bringing it up to the surface of your awareness again and again, because you keep ignoring it. Yeah. You keep rejecting it, pushing it away, creating a sense of not this, when actually that is where your deepest wisdom is learnt and felt and known, in that very thing you're rejecting.
Absolutely. And, it's in such talking the spiritual context and the recognition, because I hold it to be, you can either say, oh, that's an attitude you can take on, which in the face of reality, you can adopt a certain attitude, and that'll help you along the way, as opposed to, still adopting a different kind of attitude. What I'm saying is that, some might argue that the attitude determines the reality, but
it's prescription versus description again in some ways.
But what I'm saying is first? I do believe that the life makes more sense to me when I understand it as the whole thing is designed around my own spiritual growth.
Yeah.
That's it. If I try to understand life through a sort of a consensus reality around, comfort and getting by in life, and getting good things and having good experiences, and always like that. If I even try to look at life through that, it just doesn't add up. My life only adds up, only makes sense through that. Oh, okay, well, that makes sense because I need to learn that. That makes sense because I need to learn that. I needed to experience that in order to open something else up. I needed to.
And sometimes we need to have enough distance from something in order to be able to see those lessons.
So I think a lot of people who are sort of, let's say, suffering their experiences and experiencing, it's worth looking at what do you imagine life to be, and what do you imagine it to be for, and what's it about? Are you still thinking, oh God, why can't I kind of just have my, happy place, and no. Life is about your spiritual growth. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and so we just have to continue doing that and continue to blossom and integrate and grow, and
actually see that the process is not about an end goal per se, but the constant and continuing deepening and unfoldment of both the human and the divine as the human.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's one nature. I don't, this is quite interesting. I was reading something about, the early conceptions of Christ, the Christology, which is what's the nature of. And, I see in some ways Christ as a sort of, a demonstration of our potential natures, right? Yeah, human and divine. And so the early church, there was some conflict there around the idea that, oh, well, Christ was human and divine. Well, theologically, what is that about? Well, they have one Nestorius or something had this thing. Well, he has two natures. He has a human nature and he has a divine nature. And they had a whole council, and they all came together and pondered and contemplated deeply on it, and came to the theological conclusion, no, he has one nature. It's both human and divine. And so that's what we are. It's its demonstration. We are one nature, human and divine. They're indivisible. To say we're human is to say we're divine. To say we're divine in this sense is to say that we're human as well. So, there's to separate these two, to try to say, oh well, this is our this is one of our natures and this is another. The divine is showing up as human, and
it's
therefore
showing
is
up temporarily
divine.
As human. I think that's
Indeed.
the word
Yeah.
there that makes it all make sense,
Right.
in terms of, if you're looking at it, is the human nature is the temporary formation of the permanent divinity.
Yeah, right on.
And so when we recognize this, there is no conflict there between the two.
No, and we can. It's simply about allowing the human experience to exist. I mean, you deal a lot of this in your work in particular. That I think a lot of your teaching is about stop rejecting what's present. Stop rejecting your messy human nature.
Yeah.
If it's present, it's supposed to be present, and you have to welcome it and love it, and because you, as your nature, as being itself, already are accepting, loving the whole messy lot of it. It's the spirit that's the spiritual nature, let's say, is again, I'm flipping in and out of different understandings here, but yeah. The temporary human experience is a given. It's a gift. It's our own nature.
Yeah. This is why I use the word sacred to me. Sacred as in, it is a precious thing that is momentary. And I've seen the mind take hold of that idea that it's momentary, temporary. When the mind takes hold of that, it can get into a very nihilistic sort of, well, what's the point then?
Yeah.
But the heart takes hold of that, and the heart goes,
precious.
Every moment is precious then. There are no two moments the same. There are no two people the same. There are no two experiences and expressions the same. That's what makes it sacred. It points to, yes, it's temporary. Yes, it's fleeting. But that doesn't make it any less precious. In fact, I would say it makes it more precious.
But, and we've touched on this before, that the nihilism in response to the transient nature of reality is a viewpoint that's generated from the transient viewpoint of reality. It's another way of saying what you're just saying. If your nature as self, as awareness, as spirit is the ever-present, uncaused, unbound nature is recognized and discovered, then all that passes is fine. There's no nihilism around it. It's like a beautiful kaleidoscopic light show. It's like just enjoy the presence of this thing. To feel nihilistic, oh, it's purposeless, meaningless and stuff. That's of the mind. That's not of the living presence. It doesn't.
All you have to look at is the reality of living life. Love is present. Even if it's a very small amount of love is present. And to me, that's the seed that shows that like, I don't feel like I'm explaining this very well, but it's, I guess my point is, if it is possible, it is possible. That's what I'm trying to get to. The greater all-pervading nature, if only seen in a crumb, is still the wholeness.
The cracks are where the light comes through, right? It's that idea that, we are already that wonderful, beautiful, boundless nature of love and light and awareness and bliss. But, sometimes we're so encumbered by a crust of ignorance. But
the cracks are there, yeah.
It's just inevitably, it's passing. It'll pass. Even the longest period of, confounded ignorance will yield ultimately. And I like that. Someone like Pema Chodron is. What was that quote? Something about, I can't remember, something about the cracks, and that is quite, when life falls apart, when we experience difficult, challenging, catastrophic experiences in our life, it also becomes this wonderful opportunity to surrender and for grace to appear. But again, it's this, and I keep bumping into this, and I'm trying to clear it up in my own mind and my own communication, that this is not the consensus reality. And that when I'm aware of the messaging we're encultured with, it's not that life is a spiritual journey. No. And so most people are seeking comfort and longevity, and not that all these things are wrong. I'm not knocking it, but that is not what we're here for. It's demonstrably not what we're here for, and we can try to achieve that, but life's always going to break through and remind us that no, you're here for something else. We're here to grow. We're here to deepen in love, deepen in awareness. We're here to liberate ourselves from false ideas, false realities. Because this is the temporary thing. So what's the, if we are complete, if all we think of is that we are this body mind, that's just fills us with fear. And I'm not even talking about it. I'm not, just to be clear, I'm not talking about adopting an attitude. I'm talking about discovering a living reality. There's, you could theorize and philosophize your way out of sort of a nihilistic viewpoint and posit the existence of something beyond, some transcendent, and that's all very well and good. But that's not it. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about an actual discovery of true nature. Our true nature. What is that? What are we truly?
And the thing is, it's not some thought, imagination, experiment of trying to come to an answer. Yeah. That discovery is not as far away as we would have ourselves imagine. It's at the center of all experiencing. And as such is no more than ordinary awareness. We use the word awareness and people put a capital A on it. Mm-hmm. And imagine it to be some other worldly state, other state of experience. And what is so missed is that it's nothing other than what you are already here, right now.
Yeah.
That which is looking out of these eyes. Mm. That which, when the eyes are closed, is still aware. Mm. It's so ordinary, it's missed. It's so utterly ordinary. Our true nature is so inherently known. Mm. And I think that's why, people talk about coming home. That's what it feels like, coming home, because it's like when you've been away on holiday and you come home and there's just this sense of relaxation, this sense of, my bed, my home, And I think that that's why it feels like coming home, because it feels like this is me. No airs, no graces, no worthy or unworthy, no needing to be someone or not. It's who you are and who you always have been. But it's missed through our misbelief in who and what we think we should be.
Yeah.
And so actually, in that way, ironically, if that's the right word, the search for enlightenment, the search for awakening, while a noble endeavor in terms of it is searching for that home, but it's searching for that home outside of oneself.
Yeah.
Often at a certain point. And so
it's very hard not to. It's super hard not to objectify the object of your goal with enlightenment.
Exactly.
And then you create an idea about it. And so it's somehow other than yourself. But it's the very act of
and so then there's all these superfluous things added. Oh, it needs to feel like this. It needs to look like that. You know, like all these qualities that start to be added to the search of, oh, I'm searching for this. I'm searching for that. And you know.
I remember Adya Shanti, something stuck with me years ago. He did this online, he probably still does, like an on-ride broadcast every month or few months. Anyway, someone had phoned up and said something. Oh, I need to find the peace, or create peace. And in my experience, and his answer was really beautiful. It was, well, don't try to create it. Don't try to find it. Just notice the peace that's already present.
That's why the word notice is a really powerful word, because it's drawing the attention back to that which is already present. Yeah. It's not creating anything. It's not imagining anything. It's not going out anywhere and getting anything. It's a noticing that which is already present. And so much of, I think, good pointers are around that, noticing that which already is.
It's all about that. For me, it's all about that as well. Yeah, it's what's already true.
Yeah,
and so therefore, what and why and how are we missing that which is already present? We're already awareness. We're already Buddha nature. We're already whatever name you want to give to it. We're already peace
and so to circle back to the beginning of this conversation.
Oh,
we are already love. We are already love
too.
It's like the noticing of that love that is present here inherently
as an aspect of our nature.
Yeah, inherently here. And for that, we actually have to let go of our ideas of love. I think.
Yeah, indeed.
I think love is probably one of the most misunderstood, misconstrued ideas that we have, because generally it's all around the objects of love.
Yeah.
The actions, the doing of love, rather than the very subject of love.
Yeah, I think it's tremendously liberating. I mean, to recognize the whole. I mean, this goes across the board. To recognize that we are the source of all these qualities that we so wish to experience, and we misconstrue where the source of it is. It's not in the object, and to act that's simple. And there's simple ways to introduce someone to that idea, to that experience. Notice that you for example, think of someone that you love, and suddenly you're experiencing the love. And now just recognize that the love is there, even when you can let that memory or thought go. The love is still present. And where's it come from then?
Yeah.
If it just arises within you, you are. So it's not in the object. It's you, and that becomes a source of great self-empowerment, actually, to know, oh, I'm the source. And same with the joy.
Same with
uncaused joy. That joy, we might go, oh, it's the sunrise. Oh, it's the presence of this friend or person. But actually, it's worth noticing that how functionally that occurs as well. And so you could be just walking along, and suddenly you'll get a surge, a wave of well-being, bliss, will bubble up, joy, uncaused joy, seemingly, and notice that love as well, also love. And so I can see why we do it. So this feeling of love will arise, or the feeling of joy will arise within you. And it's really amazing how quickly the mind wants to attribute it to something outside
attach
itself.
It. I can't feel this unless it has a reason to feel this.
I love is the impression that it's like, what a lovely day, or you, or that, or something.
As if it's just wrong to love for the sake of love. Well, love is its own reward.
Love is its own reward.
And I see that time and time again, the need to attach to objects in order, like almost like the excuse to feel. And a lot of this is unconscious. No. It's not like we go out there doing that, but it's what happens is because it's like, I can't feel that love without having a reason to feel that love. It's always, as it arises, the mind wants to find a coat hanger to hang it on. A hook to land it on, and therefore it reinforces this idea that it's about that, but the love came first, not the object. Because if it was in the object would come first, and then the love would follow. It's not. The love always arises first, and it's worth exploring your own experience to look at that, see how the joy, because it's bliss, or it's love, or it's joy, quiet, uncaused. There it is, and then it wants to hook itself on something. And so it's desperately empowering, though, because if we think that our happiness, just broaden this out, if we think our happiness lies outside of ourselves, in someone else or something else, some situation, that I won't be happy until I get to... It's inherently unstable.
It's inherently unstable. We can't control the environment. But the fact is, it's just untrue. And so when you do discover the love, the joy, the bliss, the happiness, that's actually at the heart of your very being right now, in this moment, if you just settle into it, turn into it, recognize it as the very ground of your own amness, you're free, you're liberated. You don't have to seek it out anywhere else. So, and that's the quote, isn't it? Or that's the maxim. We are what we seek, and seeking's the problem. But you can't just stop seeking. I'm just going to stop seeking then. No, it comes about you. You
have to find the thing that you were seeking for and all this time, but find it within.
Find it within.
And at that point, the seeking drops away.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the first things that I absolutely noticed after my shift, was just the absence of this seeking. And then suddenly, instead of being like a lake that's constantly being bothered and disturbed and stones being thrown into it, suddenly it was like flat. No impulse to be anywhere else than I was. Just this. Peace. Happy. I mean, don't get me wrong, things stir that lake, but fundamentally you realize, and it seems like a cliche, but it is true. You are the very thing that you're seeking. We are the thing we seek. But you have to turn in, as you say, to turn the attention around, drop in.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of ins to this. There's plenty of Dharma gates that allow us to access our ground.
Yeah. But often if there is something showing up repeatedly, it's not life working against you, out to get you. It's often that's where really you'll find that which you're seeking. Yeah. And it reminds me of that. I once did a quote talking about quotes, and of course I can't remember it right now, but something about your demons will turn you'll recognize them to be your angels.
Right, it's funny. I quoted that the other night.
You did?
Yeah, to my brother. We were talking about it because there was a movie years ago, and there was a good character in it. And this guy was experiencing, I think it was called Jacob's Ladder or something. It was quite a challenging, dark movie, whatever. But he's having all these hellish experiences, and then he breaks through, and his chiropractor's this really kind of benign, benevolent figure in it, and he rescues him and puts him back together and stuff. And Jacob's going, I'm having this horrible, nightmarish, demonic experiences. And he says, Meister Eckhart said that after you die, he said, and this is a bit of a paraphrase of Meister Eckhart, but he said, like, after you die, some experience devils and demons tearing at their flesh, tearing them apart. But he said, that's because we're holding on. But when you release, we realize that those aren't demons tearing us apart. They're angels releasing us from all our attachments and all our baggage, freeing us to move on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Mark was like, my brother was like, wow. Some deep stuff. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, but it's often those things that we think are quotes, demons, the worst, something or other. Yeah. That is actually of greatest benefit to us.
Where are we holding on? Where are we grasping tightly?
Where are we resisting life?
And it's a case of, it's a bit chicken and egg, but it's a case of, why are we grasping? Well, because we need to hold on to something. We feel we need to hold on to something because we're lost to our nature, and it's that.
We're looking for our stability. We're looking for our ground.
When you realize the stability is actually in the impermanence, that you can let go.
Yeah.
And actually, moreover, you grasping is futile. So it's ignorance of the actual, nature of things that would make us even attempt to grasp at anything. If we really, really deeply recognized and understood the impermanent nature of conditioned life, we wouldn't grasp it. We wouldn't resist it.
Well, we would know that was futile.
Because it's futile.
Yeah.
So it's actually clarity again, insight, recognition that brings about the downstream, the proximal problems of clinging, grasping, resisting. Those are downstream from the non-recognition of the nature of things.
I tell you what, that word clarity just keeps coming up for me in this last couple of weeks now. Just keeps coming up. That is, talk about awakening in terms of these big ideas, but in its really simple, grounded terms, it's clarity. It's just clarity. It's non-distortion of the nature of reality. So it's clarity.
Well, that's the lake I was just talking about. The clarity is the lake. Is when it's untouched, unbothered by the energy of seeking and troubling. It reflects perfectly reality. There's no distortion. Reality is seen as it is.
So much, and I see over the years the pockets of work that I've still been engaged with have always been where there's been some unclarity of something, some unclear seeing. It's muddied waters for whatever reason. Often trauma is the reason, has been for me.
Well, it's embodied, and it takes time for it to
and the way that I have been able to unwind that is through clarity. And it's not just clarity in terms of the mind, it's clarity on all levels. But, using that clarity the way I've done it is, or the way it's happened rather, is to clear seeing leads to the sort of the energetic release and the opening up to the reality again. So where there's not clear seeing, there's a sort of a closing down around, and where there is clear seeing, there's an opening up too. And that's just a description of the response,
the process
of
it.
And so much of this for me has been about rooting out unclarity in the system.
Well, I think the magical thing is that, let's say, post-awakening, the process sort of has a life of its own.
Yeah.
And so, and not saying you still might cycle through it for a while, that's for sure. But the idea that there's a kind of an almost, not kind of, there is an always onness about awareness, the ubiquity of the light of awareness that we are. And so when something unprocessed, let's say, or embedded in board comes up, something arises, that clarity is present for it, automatically present for it, and burns but it sees it more
any
clearly.
Impurities.
I was reading something. No, I wasn't. I was listening. An early recording we did just a few months after you awakened, and it was really interesting. I was listening to you, and you were saying to me, this thing came up the other day. I can't remember what it was, a difficult sort of emotional something bubbled up in your experience, and I had no power to avoid it.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I would have, I definitely would have, because it was quite challenging, and it kind of this experience, rattled your mind, body, and it was difficult, and you were like, well, it came through, the experience was there, and then it rattled through the system, and it was difficult for a minute, and then it released off. But your point was, I had no capacity to resist anything.
No.
And we were talking in that conversation about the nature of resistance. You go, I don't even know what it is.
That still holds true 8 years later.
Yeah, what is resistance? Resistance implies this. So from a personal view, resistance is an experience coming and you resisting it. So it's two things, something resisting another. But really, from the awakened view, it's just an arising. It's just a turbulent arising that will pass through, but it feels like resistance. But that's a false overlay, a conceptual overlay that there's two things here. It's not. It's just what's arising, and that can feel difficult. And as long as there's a sort of the false sense of a person there, you feel like, I am resisting. But that's just resistance. It's a contraction that arises, and it can feel difficult. So the words that we give things, resistance, the words that we give things can really be misleading to what we're actually looking in.
The words often are a signifier of our relationship to something, and so our relationship to I am resisting this thing. It's the words show our belief there.
Well, this actually takes. I'm thinking again of these conversations, because this was a period in the months after. I've just been reviewing them, and the months after you awoke, particularly, words were, all bets were off. Concepts, words, you were like, what does that even mean? What is this? And you were just reflecting on your newly revealed nature, the fullness of that, and so many words that we just take for granted and use freely just had no had no footing in the reality that you were. It took you a while to sort of reconnect,
recalibrate all the words.
Okay, that word does
Means
actually
that.
point to something, and that word does. But this one's just some.
And I see I see so many people go through that phase, and it is a phase. Not everyone goes through it, but I see a lot of people who do go through that phase of that recalibration. It's almost like you're throwing all the Scrabble pieces down, and you gotta like you don't know what they mean anymore.
Yeah.
Because like I remember having that conversation that you're referring to. I remember it really clearly because it was quite impactful for me. I remember we were having some sort of conversation about consciousness and the universe and stuff like that. And I remember, but what does this word universe, this word consciousness, what, like, because I, as believing myself to be a person, thought I knew what consciousness meant,
Right.
what universe meant. And now having that completely be dismantled or dissolved or destroyed, so to speak, I then had to recalibrate what the word consciousness actually meant in light of my recognition. And it's almost like you've got the same dictionary, but the perspective by which you're reading it is completely different. And so now they're the same words, like I. It's the same word, but I doesn't mean personal I self anymore. I means universal consciousness, means, the I, as Ramana Maharshi would say. Yeah. So it does, there is an integration period where words are a bit funky, they feel a bit clunky, they're not quite how you used to use them, but you're not quite using them in the way that they soon do get integrated and used in a new way. So there's a bit of a clunky time there, I would say, around words, around concepts, around words, what they mean.
Okay, I think we're gonna just leave it there for today. And thanks for listening, everyone, and hope you enjoy, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.